Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this one of the most interesting days of Purdue campus life and the calendar. My name is Scaramella. I'm the Executive Vice President for Research and Partnerships and a professor of mechanical engineering. It is truly a privilege for me to participate in this event. It's always a pleasure to hear about our faculty accomplishments and the work they do, especially Mike, whom I've heard on previous occasions and had chances to actually honor him before as well. Well, 2017, this year, marks the third year of the Arden L. Bement Jr. Award. This award was established by Distinguished Professor Emeritus Arden Bement and his wife, Louise, to annually recognize a Purdue member for recent outstanding accomplishments in pure and applied sciences and engineering. The Arden Bement Jr. Award winners are nominated by their peers and selected by a faculty committee. Well, we're very pleased today that Arden is actually with us in the audience. Please give a hearty applause to David A. Ross, Distinguished Engineering Professor Emeritus, Arden Bement. And Arden, would you like to come up and say a few words?
Well, thank you very much, Suresh, for those kind words. The first thing I would like to say is that being emeritus, I live in the state of Ohio instead of the state of Indiana. And the one thing I really miss is Purdue University. I mean, I really do miss it. And I miss the collegial relationship with the faculty. But the one thing I get to do is I get to come back here once a year and meet some of the most outstanding scientists in the country as well as in the world through the prize. And I'm especially pleased to be here to welcome Mikhail Atallah and to have an opportunity to discuss his work and areas of interest. And the same thing applies to the former awardees of the prize. So as long as I live, I hope I'll be able to enjoy that every year, to come back to campus and have a scientific or an engineering research discussion with the prize winner. And this year's prize winner is really, truly outstanding, as the other two winners have been. So I also want to congratulate the committee, the selection committee for the prize, to continue their record of picking really, truly outstanding scientists. Thank you.
Thank you, Arden. I will have someone send you the next 50 years of dates for this event, so please put them on your calendar. We booked this room ahead of time. Our previous award winners, some of them will join us at the recognition event later this evening. At this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage Petros Druneas, who is Associate Professor in Computer Science, and he will introduce this year's recipient of the Arden L. Bement Jr. Award, and awardee, who is, of course, as you've heard now, Distinguished Professor of Computer Science, Mikhail Atallah. Sunil Prabhakar, who is the head of the department and who is the nominator for this year's award, could not be here today, and he's asked Professor Druneas to introduce him. Please welcome Professor Druneas.
So thank you very much. Hello, and welcome to the Bement Distinguished Lecture. So I'm Professor Druneas. I'm a professor at the Computer Science Department of Purdue University. I chair the department's awards committee, and I was a co-nominator along with Sunil Prabhakar for Dr. Mikhail Atallah for this esteemed award. It's my privilege today to tell you a few things about Mikhail Atallah before he addresses us today. So, Professor Atallah has distinguished himself as an authority in the fields of theoretical computer science, distributed computing, and cybersecurity. He is truly known throughout the world for research that addresses today's most challenging computational and security issues. He has made significant and groundbreaking contributions in the design, analysis, and implementation of efficient processing and security protections for computer-based technologies. He is the co-founder of Arden Technologies, a company whose software is currently used in over 500 million devices worldwide. The fundamental principle underlying Arden's innovations is to inject self-protective mechanisms in software, making it basically harder to hack. He has been a member of the Purdue faculty since 1982 after he completed his PhD at Johns Hopkins University. He was named a full professor in 1989, and he has been a distinguished professor since 2004. His work has been recognized in many ways. That includes the Test of Time Award at the 2015 ACM Conference on Computer and Communication Security. That's a leading conference in Mike's field. The 2016 Purdue Sigma Xi Faculty Research Award, the 2013 Purdue Outstanding Commercialization Award. He has been keynote and invited speaker at numerous national and international meetings. He has served on the editorial boards of top journals. He has served on the program committees of top conferences and workshops in his field. He was selected in 1999 as one of the best teachers in the history of Purdue University, and he has been included in Purdue's Book of Great Teachers. Last but not least, he's a fellow of both major societies in our field, the Association for Computing Machinery, ACM, and the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE. And now I would like to welcome Mikhail Atallah to the lectern to hear what he has to say on opportunities and perils of the cyber revolution.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Petros, for this very kind introduction, and thank you, Suresh, and thank you, Professor Bement, for your generosity and for being such a great role model for us all. I would like to talk about this only as it pertains to, so that I can tie it to my work that I will present, my specific results that I will give you an overview of. And I'll just tie them to these themes here, so I won't even come close to addressing these issues in all the detail that they deserve. You know about the cyber revolution. It has been driven by rapid advances in computing, storage, and communication, a combination of better hardware. You've all heard of the doubling of speed every 2 years, Moore's law, and more importantly, better ways of using it. And it has given us huge benefits. Our lives have improved, and it's likely to get much better. We might be relieved from the tyranny of having to drive and cars, and we might be able to have, we already have remote surgeries and all kinds of such things. Truly wonderful things. There are, unfortunately, with complexity comes vulnerability. Always, throughout history, this has been the case, even going back to the Roman Empire. I mean, it's always a feature of complex systems and societies that they're more vulnerable. And there are huge security hazards, and they're also, just like the benefits are likely to get better, the hazards are likely to get worse. Computer crime, I don't need to tell you that. You can read the newspaper, but what you might not know is what you read in the newspaper is 10% of what really happens. The computer crime by both insiders and outsiders is widely underreported. You can imagine why they don't report it. They only report it if the law requires them to report it. Otherwise, they just hush it. The reason is obvious. It drives the stock price down. It makes you look incompetent. And it's bad for business. And I have to say that avoiding the perils, we will do our best to avoid the perils. I will contribute to that. Others have contributed a lot to that. But it's going to be an uphill struggle because the odds inherently favor the offense over the defense for various reasons. It's difficult to predict an attack, which attack method will be used. You might say, protect against all of them. Well, two things about that. It's very expensive, first, and second, how do you protect against something you don't even know about? Because there's a surprising element in all the attacks sometimes. And it's difficult to detect an ongoing attack. And then there's the attribution problem. Who has done it? The answer is not easy to come up with. When Estonia was attacked as a country and brought to its knees in a cyber sense in 2007, a third of the computers involved were from our country, from the United States. It doesn't mean we attacked Estonia. It means we had computers that were compromised and were used in the attack. I don't need to tell you who attacked Estonia, of course. We all know that. A major problem, which really is not a technical problem, but I have to acknowledge that it's a major problem, is the misaligned incentives. So a lot of the things you read about could have been avoided had known technologies been deployed. So there are technologies that solve many of the problems of cybersecurity that are just not deployed. And the problem, the reason they're not deployed is not a technical reason. It's an incentives reason. Those who make the decision to deploy, the cost-benefit analysis they make is not good. Basically, the benefits is their benefits as executives. The costs are not theirs, though. If something bad happens, the costs are borne by you, who gets your identity stolen, society as a whole. And it's amazing that there's no clawback, that they mess up and they get to keep their bonus. Anyway, there's no clawback. There's no regurgitation of the ill-gotten gains in any way. And this is not just a cybersecurity problem. This is a problem in finance. This is what gave us the crisis of 2007. I don't need to, So this is bigger than me, this problem. But we have to acknowledge its existence, because here we are developing wonderful technologies, and you don't see them in use. But there's a lesson in that major problem of misaligned incentives. Is if you want people to adopt it, you have to make it ridiculously cheap. You have to make it not interfere with the bonus of the executive, with the profits, with, it has to be ridiculously cheap, ridiculously unobtrusive, not interfere with time to market, because the cost-benefit analysis is crooked in some sense. You have to make the cost ridiculously low. Then it becomes compelling to adopt it. And I will talk more about that later. And finally, I would like to say that the cyber revolution has given small groups disproportionate and unprecedented power to inflict huge damage. And not just the cyber revolution, but in general, technology has empowered small groups. We've never been in that situation. I mean, in the history of the human species, we've never had a situation where such small numbers of people could wreak such havoc on so many. Think about it. I mean, you go back to the days of the Roman Empire. You have 12 disgruntled people in the Roman Empire. What could they do? Okay, the 12 of them, get their hands on the most fearsome weapon of the time, which was the short Roman sword, the gladius, from which the word gladiator came. And okay, so they got 12 short Roman swords, and let them do the damage that they can do. What can they do? They can't affect millions. But look what's happening now. Someone in their basement in some foreign country could, with a few clicks, bring major corporations unprecedented grief. So this is a very unique situation, I'm afraid. If someone can point me to history in which really tiny numbers of people could have such hugely disproportionate impact, not by a fluke, but in a systematic way and repeatable way. I know World War I and the archbishops shooting and all that, but that was, that was not a systemic thing. It was an unlucky and unfortunate event. So progress, on the other hand, we can do something about, a lot about, and that will require better algorithms and protocols. The hardware bonus is slowing down, I would say. And it has never been what it's cracked up to be. The reason we have such fast speeds today is not Moore's law. I'm sorry for my colleagues who are in hardware. It's important, but that's not why things are so fast today. They are so fast today because of algorithms, protocols, software, what we do with the hardware. I will illustrate that with this simple example. Suppose you have an algorithm that takes time proportional to 10 to the n. And there are such algorithms, like in numbers. Each of the n could be a digit in the number, and the number of possibilities. Any enumerative approach to solving a problem. Imagine one that takes 10 to the n. Just imagine it. You're not going to be able to solve large problems, and hardware will not bail you out, because a trillion-fold increase times 10 to the 12 increase in hardware size would allow you to increase the problem sizes that you can solve by a pathetic 12. That's not very impressive. I mean, if we can do things faster, dramatically faster for such problems than our ancient ancestors, if you go 25 centuries ago, some of the problems we're working on and trying to solve now and struggling with were actually attacked by the Greek philosophers in those days. And sometimes they succeeded, and we still use their algorithms. And sometimes they did not, and we still have a bloody nose from where they failed. We can't do it still. But the point is that they were slow because they did it manually, but we do it with computers. But it doesn't make that much difference because of the exponential function, which is really, really bad news. So on the other hand, look at this. If the algorithm had been n squared, by n squared I mean n is problem size, and whenever I say n squared, I mean proportional, time proportional to n squared. You could get a million-fold increase in problem sizes that you can solve if you have a trillion-fold increase in speed. So the algorithms are very important, and progress in algorithms is going to be very, very significant. What's a good algorithm? As you may guess, it's one that's not exponential, right? I mean, for sure. And a common definition is that it takes time proportional to n to the k for some small integer k, where n is problem size. So, for example, if the input is an integer x, then n is the number of digits in its representation. Okay, it's not x, it's log x. So how small should k be? And well, it depends on problem size. In the old days, a k of 3, 4 was okay, was good, but not today. Today we have massive data. And even a small k of 2 or 3 could be very impractical, quite impractical. If n is the number of users, if the graph you're dealing with is the Facebook graph, well, the number of nodes is 2 billion, last I checked. It was 2 billion. And take n to the cube and see what happens. 2 billion raised to the power 3. It's n cube is sometimes today with massive data, with truly massive data, you want linear. You don't want anything super linear. And finally, I want to say that we wish progress in algorithms, but we really would like some computational problems to remain difficult. Really, we would be panicked if they did not remain difficult. And because a better algorithm for them can spell disaster. One such problem is factoring. What is factoring is you take a large prime P, a large prime Q, you multiply them, and you obtain M, the product of two large primes. And given P and Q, you can compute M, but given M, it is believed difficult to come up efficiently, quickly, with P and Q. This is called the factoring problem. And today's cybersecurity infrastructure relies on the assumed difficulty of solving not only this problem, but other number theoretic type of problems. Not just this one. This is one of them. This is a major one. But how important is this? This is very important. Whenever you bank online, whenever you do anything on the internet, if anyone came up with a breakthrough for one of these problems, like this one, the factoring, if some kid in their basement came up with an efficient algorithm for factoring, it would be really bad news for the world economy, because they could empty all the money from the Federal Reserve, from all the companies, and the whole infrastructure would collapse. You'd have a depression of unprecedented proportions. Now, it's not going to happen, but we don't have a proof that it cannot happen. Okay? So what's the evidence that we have that the problem, and this and other problems are difficult? Well, the proof is not a proof, but it's evidence, and the evidence goes along these lines. For 25 centuries we've been trying, right, since the days of the ancient Greeks, and nobody succeeded. And since everybody, since the day of the Greeks until today, is so smart and hasn't been able to, probably no one in the future will. Something like that, right? But that's not a proof. And, well, I just want to say that this is, it's amazing that human ingenuity, that if you hit a stumbling block in terms of, I cannot do this, people will build a contraption whose proper functioning relies on that difficulty. I mean, it's quite amazing. I go back to, imagine that you were one of the ancient Greeks 25 centuries ago trying to do certain computations. You would never have suspected that 25 centuries later, people would still be struggling with what you're doing, A. And then that in a period of, a few decades, they would switch from being ecstatic at a possible solution to being terrified that it might occur. Right? I mean, just a few decades ago, I'm old enough to know that because, in the 70s is when RSA crypto system came about. And up until then, we couldn't have cared less whether someone came up with an algorithm for factoring. Well, we would have been very excited, actually. It would have been a wonderful paper. We would have presented it in our classes, but we wouldn't have been exactly panicky about it. Not like today. And what has happened is there's infrastructure that has been built. There's trillions of dollars at stake. And so we want this problem to be solved, but not too quickly. Not too quickly. Eventually, it will be solved because there's something coming that will solve it called quantum computers. So quantum computers are game changers in this area, but they're not here yet. They will be here at some point. So in the long run, relying on the difficulty of factoring is doomed. But in the long run, we're all dead also. So the short run is important, and so we want things solved, but not too quickly. This is like St. Augustine. It was St. Augustine, something like that. Give me virtue, but not yet, not yet. We want that here also. We want, let us solve all these problems, but not quite yet. Wait until it doesn't do too much damage. So here's some of my results that I will talk about. Two of them settle open problems. The first one and the last one. The middle two are insecurity and have had a very large impact, I believe. I'll tell you why they've had impact also. I'll tell you the what and the why. Who cares? I won't have time to tell you the how. And believe me, you should be grateful to me that I'm not attempting to tell you the how. But the how is quite involved and involves equations and things like that. And I was told that every equation loses half the audience. And so there will be no equations beyond m equal p times q. So let me talk about the first one. Oh, first, whenever I say we, it's with these guys, the 4 students with whom the work was done. Wonderful, wonderful students, PhD students of mine. None of these results would have happened without them. It was magic. Working with them was like magic. It was fantastic. I miss them dearly. I wish I could have kept them here. And let me just say that I chose them on the grounds not only of the significance of the work with them, but also recency. Recency because the results, because the Bement Award is for more recent. So if my students from the early 80s and 90s were here, I would apologize to them that I did not include them because their work is just as nice. Okay, we resolved many open problems at that time also. But I can't talk about them. They're too ancient, and I have to talk about more recent things. And this is one that that was previously open for the dawn from the dawn of computing. I mean, whenever we had computers, we wanted to do range queries, and range queries are two-dimensional range queries. They could be one-dimensional. Basically, you have a range in an array, and you want to ask questions about that range, and you want a quick answer to that question, you're allowed to pre-process the array, but not too much. So you can pre-process the array in linear time, but you want to answer those questions in constant time. Constant means independent of the size of the array. So here, the open problem was you're given an n by n matrix of numerical values, and you want to pre-process it in time proportional to its size. You cannot do superlinear. This is truly massive data, and even log n is too big. Log of a billion is 40, and a 40-fold slowdown is not acceptable. And the query, so you have to pre-process it in linear time so that you can answer in constant time queries like the range minimum query, which specifies 2 rows, 2 columns, and you have to return quickly in constant time the smallest value in the rectangular range defined by these rows and columns. And I think I can best illustrate this with a picture. So this is the array, the 2-dimensional array, and a query consists of 2 rows and 2 columns, and you have to very quickly give the minimum value in the red area or reddish area. It's very simple to state. I could never resist puzzles of this nature. It doesn't have to do with computers even. You can think about it as a puzzle, with paper and pencil, and think about it. So I'm allowed to touch things a constant number of times. I'm allowed to look at the input and go through it and scan it and look at it and do computations on it in time proportional to how big it is. Okay, you cannot avoid that. And then you have to answer in constant time questions about it, right? This type of question. And I thought every time I looked at how old this problem is, I keep gaining a few decades. I thought it was 3 decades old, and then someone pointed out to me, I think it was Petros, that it was even older than that. So it's ancient. From the dawn of computing, people wanted to do this. And did I tell you that we solved it? That's why I wouldn't have this slide otherwise, right? I wouldn't be talking about it if we didn't solve it. So the problem is easy if it's addition instead of min. Why? Because you can pre-compute sums. For example, all possible yellow rectangles, you can pre-compute their sum, the sum of what's in them. So if you wanted the sum of the elements in the region of interest, it's very easy to do that, to solve the problem. Because you use something, use inclusion, exclusion, and like if you want the red, you can write it as a linear combination of 4 of the 4 yellows, and you can imagine which ones they would be. But the problem with min is you cannot subtract. That's the problem. There's no inverse. There is no inverse element. If you have the min of A, B, you cannot, and it's A, you've lost B, right? And that's the difficulty. So we cannot, for plus, we were able to overcount and then correct by subtracting, but we can't do that here. And it eluded the best names in data structuring, and previously known only for 1-dimensional case, and that was not easy to start with. The 1-dimensional case was not easy. It was a major breakthrough, like 3 decades ago. Very important problem. Tons of applications. Range minimum query. Bioinformatics textbooks have range minimum query. All kinds of issues have problems. This problem arises in all kinds of applied situations. And you see today data is not only massive, it's also multidimensional. So 1-dimensional solutions are not enough. Data is multidimensional. I mean, a record has many attributes. It doesn't have just a latitude, right, in geospatial. It has a latitude, a longitude, a precipitation, average temperature, all kinds of data about it. And you really want to ask range. And our solution generalizes, by the way, to higher dimensions. And it is not, so when I say it eluded the best names in data structuring, I don't mean that they didn't know about it. That doesn't count. That's not elusive. Elude means you wrote a paper and you were suboptimal. That's what elude means. It's not. An open problem, anything that's like 2 years old doesn't qualify as an open problem. You have to have decades and decades of history and papers written about it, et cetera, et cetera. That qualifies as an open problem. So this qualifies as an open problem. But some of my other results don't settle open problems because they settle a problem I posed in some sense. So Unfortunately, I can't tell you as much as I would love to the how. So I will move on. Key management in access hierarchies. So this result has achieved, just gathered 500 citations in a snap, just like that. It has been very, very impactful. It has received the CCS Test of Time Award. And what is it? So it's hierarchical access control is pervasive, and it's of central importance in role-based access control. So in role-based access control, they don't give you access privileges as Joe, or Nancy. They assign you to a role in the organization. You're a doctor, you're a nurse, you're a professor. So you get a role in the organization, and you acquire through that role the access privileges for that role. So when you hire someone, you don't have to actually make a decision of, do I let them access this file, this picture? No, you just assign to them the role. And it's a very popular way of doing things and has gained ground over all competing approaches. And it's modeled by a directed graph, and access to a node implies access to all the nodes that are reachable from that node. And there's a different encryption key for each node's data. So a node in the graph has documents and information associated with it that's encrypted using a secret key. Okay? And you don't want to give a user too many keys because it's impractical and inefficient, especially when updates are made. If you want to fire someone or hire someone, or you don't want to give them the whole key ring, so to speak, 10,000 keys. Give me back your 10,000 keys and I will change them. Or here is 10,000 keys in case of a hire. No, you want one key. One key. One key to rule them all. And the solution is key derivation. So what is key derivation? So here's the picture. So this is the way the data is organized. So you have to imagine an encryption key associated with node I, an encryption key associated with node E. And there are tons of documents at each node, all encrypted with the same key. Okay? And when you're assigned a role, you're assigned a node, like D. You're D, for example. Well, if you're D, we give you the key for D, and we would like you to be able to derive all the keys for C, G, H, F, I, because they're reachable from D, from your role. It's very convenient. We give you the key for D, and you can derive everything else from that key for D. Not as easy as it looks. The concept is easy, but and it's just very convenient for updating, very convenient for everything. But how do you do it? And this is what we were able to do. And it's not. So we give a key for D, and that's all we give you. And you can derive everything you're entitled to from that. So key derivation is, that's what it is. And it's not, the difficult part is having collusion resistance. So you can come up with mathematical functions that allow the derivation to take place. But those mathematical functions would not have collusion resistance in the sense of collusion is this. I have access to this. You have access to that. If we got together and colluded and exchanged our information, we should not be able to access more than the union of what we are entitled to in the first place. We shouldn't access some new information. And that was difficult also to achieve. And we have the dynamic support for updates. And it's really nifty. It's really a nifty result. It's a long paper, but we are very fast, practically constant time, even when the V2W path is long. So don't think for a second that we hop along the path deriving as we go along. Not for a second. That would be too slow. We don't do that. We just immediately derive it. This is key derivation. Another result that I think Petros mentioned that is deployed 500 million devices. So it's on your it's on your cell phone now as we speak. I can confidently say that, probably 3 or 4 times, because every instance. So it doesn't protect your cell phone itself. It protects the apps on your cell phone, the individual apps on your cell phone. we designed techniques for automatically injecting custom protective functionality in existing software, and any software becomes self-protecting. And it does not interfere with the development process, and we provide techniques for easy specification of the protections. So the automatically injected protections have a small impact on the size and speed of the program, have customizable functionality whatever the customer wants. If they want us to detect and alert them, that's fine. Notify, repair the damage, yeah, we can do that. You can repair the damage. Retaliate, nobody chooses retaliate for obvious reasons. Because if you lash out, you could be lashing out at the wrong, the wrong perpetrator. But just it's possible. And they're stealthy and resistant to detection and removal. And I have to add this. And using this technology is dirt cheap, okay? That's crucial. It's so cheap. It's automated, right? There's no manual anything. And you go to the customer and you tell them, we won't interfere with your time to market. We won't interfere with your software development process. You could imagine more secure techniques, but if you go and tell the software company, oh, we are going to get you to produce much more secure software, here's what I'd like you to do. And if it involves any change, absolutely any change in the way they do things, they will kick you out immediately. They don't want you interfering with that. It's difficult enough as it is. So anything that interferes, so when security competes with anything, you name it, functionality, cost, if it interferes with anything, it loses the battle immediately. It's like, that's my experience. So we provide all of this very, very cheaply. It's compellingly cheap. Why should software self-protect, you might wonder? Why doesn't the app rely on your cell phone? Well, I think you know why. Because your cell phone can be compromised, your laptop can be compromised, and instead of being a source of protection, it could be a source of mischief. Someone could break into your device, someone could physically take control of it. And so self-protection by software is a second line of defense. So one of the things about whenever we had a customer, how we reached the 500 million mark. By the way, that was 2015, and I hear that 2016 was a gangbusters year, so it's probably more like 1 billion now. But whenever we had a customer, they always insisted that we not tell that they're customers. And you can imagine why, because you don't want to give to the adversary this gift of which technology is being used, even though it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. But just why give them that gift? So don't ask me which of my apps in my cell phone uses your technology. I know, but I can't tell you. There's things like NDAs and stuff like that. Well, I could tell you, but then, I think there would be some penalties. I'd lose my house. They'd take my children, and, So defense in depth is a good idea. Self-protection is a second line of defense. You want a second line of defense, you want a third line of defense. And it was successfully commercialized in 2 ways. One, in the commercial sector, the company was acquired, ArcSign Technologies was acquired in 2013. And right now it has 12 locations, 6 in the USA and 1 of each of these countries. Earlier than that, the defense arm of the company, because there was 2 companies, Defense Systems, and for the commercial, it was sold by Microsemi, which is a $6.1 billion corporation. And they kept the offices in West Lafayette here, so they're still here. So that's how, if you're wondering what is Microsemi doing in West Lafayette, that's what it's doing. It bought us out, and this was a joint entrepreneurial effort with John Rice, who I'm delighted to see here, and Tim Korb, is Tim here? And others. And it was really a very nice adventure. We all, I believe, have a case of seller's remorse. That's right, John? Because we sold it when it wasn't 500 million devices. It was, I think, 100 or 200 million devices. And a tenfold, fivefold. It's significant, but good for them. I mean, good for this is capitalism, right? They took a risk. It could have become zero, right? So, however, it does feel like seller's remorse a little bit. You will never hear about this company. It will quietly be profitable, but you will not hear about it in the news. You will, the reason is the one I told you is we hush everything. We don't tell you that it's there and it's installed. So it's quietly making money, but not, it's well. If you read it in the headlines, it will not be in a good context. Let me put it this way. And in that case, I think John and I will lose our seller's remorse at that point. I told you the main idea. So the main idea of the approach is, so what's the underlying security theme is that, look, I think you know that the malware problem is essentially unsolvable. You know that. There's a proof of that, actually, in US, in one of the universities in California. I think Fred Cohen gave a proof that you cannot write software that gets rid of malware. And so the antivirus task is an impossible task. You cannot do it, really. In general, you cannot have, it's undecidable, which is strong evidence that you're going to have difficulty solving it. And we turn this difficulty, so if removing malware is difficult, removing goodware is difficult also. Goodware is us. We're goodware. We inject something, new functionality that's protective in nature. That's us. So, and we, and we do a better job than malware. Why? Because malware, the malware writers have to do it without the cooperation of the software vendors. Right? They're victimizing the software vendors. We do it with the blessing and cooperation of software vendors. They're our customers. So we do a much better job of resilience and stealthiness because they're on our side. So anyway, I think I'm running low on time. How much do I have?
Maybe another 5 minutes.
5 minutes. I can finish in 5 minutes. So what I want to stress is this is a very cost-effective approach. It's ridiculously cost-effective, and this is what you want. So, it's you want it done automatically. Manually is a non-starter, usable on any software, and you want it separate from the software development process. They don't want you to interfere with their process. You want to have a facility for writing the protections very easy. You can specify at a high level what kind of protections do you want, detect, notify, retaliate, whatever, and then it gets compiled into the protection. So everything is high level and flexible functionality. You could change everything overnight. Change everything, which you could not do with hardware-based protections. Hardware-based protections are there. You're not going to reconfigure everything. You can't change it. It's in silicon. And it's resistant to attack. I can tell you stories about that, but I don't have time, so I will move on to the last open problem that I solved, we solved with How Yuan. So the previous, this is a problem you can all relate to. It's very, very easy to explain. So let me tell you what it is. You have an array, one-dimensional array. This problem arises in image processing. And you have a one-dimensional array of values. You cannot assume anything about the values, that they're small integers or anything. They could be arbitrarily large. And you want to slide a window of width w from the beginning of the array to the end of the array. You imagine the answer obtained that way. You don't actually obtain it that way. That would be too naive to do it. It would take NW comparisons. We don't want to do that. But you imagine sliding a window of size w, and for each position of the window, which is shown in red here, you compute the smallest entry. And that's part of the output array. So the input is an array of size n, and the output is an integer w. The output is another array of size n minus w. N minus w, because once the window hits the end, it cannot fall off the end. It's the end of it. So very simple to state. And what's the problem? The problem is we want to use only n comparisons. And I don't know anyone who thought it was possible before we did it. Really, honestly. The reason people thought it was not possible because there's a proof that you can't find the minimum of n entries in less than n comparisons. Because each comparison knocks out one candidate. And so you're not going to do n over 2 comparisons or fewer comparisons. You're stuck with pretty much n minus 1 comparisons. Minus 1 is a lower order term, so we say 1 times n. And people thought that this is so much more complicated than computing the minimum. Computing the minimum is you go through the whole array and pick a champion. What could be simpler than that? That is n. And this complicated thing could not possibly be n. So people were surprised. There's a long series of papers where they progressively are shocked to find out. The first shock was that you could do it independent of W, in time independent of W. The first 3n comparisons was the first paper. 3n comparisons, widely cited, low-hanging fruit, very easy actually. I could tell you about it in 2 minutes. And I gave it as a homework to 580. The 580 students. Okay, so they didn't solve it, but but we use only n comparisons. Previous best was 1.5n. So 1.5n, there was a paper about that. And you might wonder what's the difference between 1.5n and n. In practical terms, I would say not that much difference. But we're professors, we're scholars, we're not just practical people, right? In the community, this attracts the attention of people. It's a puzzle, and I want them they go to a conference and say, did you hear that Purdue, where researchers were able to do it in 1 times n? Yeah, we did that in 1 times n. Again, I still consider some of my nicest results to be from the early 80s and 90s, but they're beyond the sliding window, so to speak, for this award. So I focused on I'm saying this in case this is taped, and my former students from whose picture I did not show feel a little bit hurt. They were here too soon. So I will open it up to questions then, or comments.
All your students are very proud of you. But questions for Mike?
Or comments.
Or less than 1 n for the answer to that sliding window thing.
Yes.
Well, I missed the last part of this, but just from that one slide, it looked as though the solution could be somewhat related to your earlier minimum array, finding the minimum value within a set of columns and rows.
Would you mind repeating the question?
Yeah. The question is that the last open problem looks related to the first open problem. That's a very good question. It's not really, because we can solve it using the first problem.
Oh, okay.
It's a special case of the first problem, but the solution would not be 1 times n comparisons. You see right. And so it'd be like 2n, 3n. They don't want that. So the game, and this is a different community. So the two communities are very different. The first paper was published in a conference called SODA, which consists of people who think constant factors don't matter too much. The last one is in IEEE transactions on image. One of the IEEE is the image processing community, where what do you mean there's no difference between 1 and 1.5? There's a huge difference between 1 and 1.5. So it's a different community. So the audience was different. But you're absolutely right. You could hit it on the head with the first one and get an answer, but it would not attract the attention of the image processing people. The image processing people need something else. They're more practically oriented. And you're one of them, so you know that, right? Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, you presented a couple of problems where you're solving open problems, which debatably whether they're by themselves practically making a huge difference. But in the middle, you present something where it's a real breakthrough in practical use as well. And is there, how do those relate? How does it, I mean,
so yes, so the question is, I presented two things that are like rather theoretical, the first and the last. And then in the middle there were those two that were eminently practical and with impact in the real world. And how do you, relate those and compare? First, I would say this was deliberate. This was deliberate. So I chose results that will tickle the mathematically oriented amongst you. And I chose results that will tickle the practically oriented amongst you. I have contributed to both. And so I chose them deliberately that way. Now, I would say there is one result that combines both, and that would be the key management one. The key management one is ruthlessly mathematical. It involves very complicated proofs of security. You could argue that most of the contribution lies in the proofs of security and adversarial models. So it's not just an engineering thing. The software protection one is a huge engineering project, gigantic. You have no idea. So the time and money between a very good idea and its software embodiment is huge. You're talking years and years of time. I'm talking not an academic quality product. I'm talking about a commercial quality product. It's not no bugs, good user interfaces, support for the product. It's not just years. It's also tens of millions of dollars of development funds. So they're very different in nature, and they're more different even than what you said, because it's the software protection one is a giant engineering project, and is more so than a conceptual, because the concept is, the insight is, malware is an impossible task. The antivirus industry has made a business model of it because whatever they sell you is doomed to fail, right? And they love it. They love to sell you the next one, because the minute you buy it, it will fail, because the ingenuity of the malware writers will make it fail. It's an undecidable problem, and so it's fantastic for them. Don't feel sorry for them. That's their business model. So the insight is very simple, we'll use goodware. Okay, do it. And yes?
My question is actually more of a meta question, which is, how is it you move between these two very different types of problems, very different types of areas? And what insights do you have for the rest of us?
So the reason I moved between them is this. And it's a very good question. So I'm sorry, I misunderstood it as a meta question. So the answer is very simple: funding. Why is it funding? My funding, 100% of it, is in security. So obviously there has to be something of the type of 2 and 3. For the open problems, 1 and 4, I had zero funding for them, absolutely zero funding for them. So why did we do them is a very good question. Why did we spend time on them? And was it responsible to involve a student in that, which has been open for half a century? That is a very good question. I was ethical in the sense that I warned the student. First, I told the student, this is not your thesis. This is not your thesis. Whether you solve it or not, you will have a PhD. This is an adventure, a puzzle that will likely end up in a bloody nose for both of us. But if we manage to do it, then it's a nice feather in our cap. That's the idea. That's the psychology of it. And it was in the same way that some people cannot resist a chess puzzle. Or just generally, my aunt could not end her day without finishing the crosswords. She wasn't paid for it. It was just a passion for it. So I would say 1 and 4 are my passion. my deep love for algorithms and data structures, my very first love that I come back to now, and I will come back to when I retire, actually. So my heart is in that, okay? But my heart is also in the others, because I couldn't have gotten anywhere without it. But this explains the eclectic mix, And for those of you who know me, if you come to me with a nice puzzle and say, Mike, how about this? I absolutely do not care if it's in the area of image processing or mechanical engineering or whatever. If it catches my fancy, and if you can state it in a sentence especially, like one puzzle-like sentence, given this, can you do that with this performance? I cannot resist this. And you are watching survivorship bias in action here, because I have presented to you those cases where I did not have a bloody nose. My wife, Karen, who is in the audience, knows of a problem I worked on for 7 years in the 1990s. And I had to have, in the end, a New Year's resolution that I will not touch it anymore. Because it was bloody nose after bloody nose after bloody nose. I could not solve it. I can tell you what it is. It's very simple to state. It's one sentence. And I could not get anywhere in it. By 7 years, I don't mean every waking hour. I do mean 1 month each of the 7 years. 1 full month of sleepless nights and all that. And just, so I'm not, there is bias in the presentation. There is definitely survivorship bias, right? This is what it is, where I survived. Thank you. Yes.
Now that the Chinese have shown that quantum entanglement can occur over 10,000 kilometers, what is there that will defeat quantum entanglement for key exchange?
Could you repeat that, please?
Quantum entanglement for key exchange. So quantum key exchange, anything quantum computing, quantum cryptography are game changers. And they, the quantum key exchange relies on physics rather than on cryptography. It's inherent.
Well understood physics.
Well understood, it works. It works. Everybody thought it would not work. I remember the very first talk by the Montreal colleagues, where people were saying, oh, this will never work. If the table shakes, they'll get the wrong answer. But they made it work, and it works on fiber optic cables, first tens of miles, then hundreds of miles. And you can go out and buy it. Quantum computing is coming, and it will factor very quickly, well, quickly enough. It can do factoring. But they're not here yet. Quantum computing is not here yet. But anything quantum is a game changer. And I think it behooves us computer scientists to learn some more about physics and see the boundary between disciplines is very interesting. And this is a prime example of something which is computer sciencey and something which is physics getting together for a wonderful combined insights and products like that. And entanglement, Einstein had doubts about entanglement, as you know, because it's... No, that was his doubt. The does not play dice with the universe was his doubt about quantum, about the probabilistic nature of matter. But the entanglement looked to him like it violated the speed of light constraints, that you could have two entangled particles at both.
At a distance.
Yeah.
Mike, let's take one last question, short one and a short answer.
With respect to your practical work, the Arden technologies, were you able also to write academic papers on that? Did you disclose all the principles, and it works in spite of that?
Yes. We have an academic paper. We have patents. Pretty much, patents were the way for if you want to allow, because the culture of industry is you don't disclose anything. So, but we had already disclosed in an academic paper that's widely cited. So the basic ideas were already out there, but they were refined over a period of time And John and I and we have patents because that's one way you can get executives, corporate executives, to go along with publishing is if you tell them this will be in a patent. It will be a barrier to entry for competitors.
Besides, if you make $6 billion, I think it's okay to not have a paper, right?
They don't care about papers.
No, you made $6 billion.
We didn't make. No. This is Microsemi is a $6 billion corporation. I didn't make hardly anything.
Anyway, well, with that, I think let's give Mikhail Atallah a very big hand again.
Thank you.